Novel, In Bad Company, Quai du Sol. Chapter 1. One of the things that stays in my mind about that morning is the brightness of the sunshine as I stepped out of the house and walked across the driveway to the car. I had only just finished whitewashing the outside walls of the farm in preparation for the wedding, and the glare of the new paint contrasted with the brilliant green of the spring grass. It was sort of a peaceful Sunday, when every small sound seemed magnified. Somewhere down the paddock, among the trees, a dog was barking, and near the fence, two of the neighbors' horses noisily chomped on the grass. I looked around thinking, what a perfect day for a ride. Far in the distance, on the highway, I recognized the rhythmic hum of a Harley-Davidson motor. I pictured the rider sitting low in the saddle with the sun in his face. The direction of the sound told me he was heading away. Perhaps he too was going to the bike meet, but unlike me, he was going in style. I looked at my rusty car with its sunroof taped up where Fat Butt, the goat, had nibbled away the rubber seal, and my spirits fell. I noticed one of the cats had left muddy paw prints on the bonnet again. Still, it was transport. I was almost bowled over by the scramble of kids fighting to beat each other to the front seat. I had 3 kids of my own, but when it came to outing, I would always inherit a few more little darlings from the neighborhood. Earlier that morning, I had been through the ritual of ringing parents to make sure that it was okay for their kids to go to the bike meet with us. Bike meets, or swap meets as they were sometimes called, were one of the few biker activities where kids could be included. This is where bikers got together to exchange a bike or bike parts, and usually there would be live music and food, maybe a pig on a spit, and stands selling t-shirts and jewelry. It was like a big fair for bikers and their families. There were occasions where you'd meet up with friends you had not seen for a while, perhaps have a few drinks, talk about old times, and plan parties for the future. The Old Motorcycles Club was organizing this particular meet. Although it was an enthusiasts club, the meet was open to anyone. Various outlaw clubs and loners, as well as the enthusiasts, were going to be there. The atmosphere was nearly always cordial. In the past, any bad blood between the outlaw clubs was put aside at these meets or biker shows, and a type of truce was in place. One year there had been a stabbing at a bike show arising from a disagreement between 2 rival outlaw clubs, but it came down hard on everyone afterwards. After that incident, there had been a sort of unwritten agreement between the bike clubs, and it was clearly understood that there would be no problems, no hassles. Any hassles would be dealt with off location, away from the show or meet. Since that one event long ago, there hadn't been any real trouble at a meet, certainly not in the past few years. I did a final head count that Sunday morning. 5 kids, Roy, Irina, and Charlie, along with 2 neighbors' kids, Duran and Josh. They had all stashed their pocket money carefully in their jean pockets and were planning to buy themselves a biker t-shirt each. There was a sticker on the bumper saying, "When I grow up, I want to be a Rolls Royce." And that car was referred to all of us as the Rolls, or sometimes as the Rolls can hardly, because it could hardly get out of the yard to roll down the driveway. But with a team of eager pushers, we could manage to get her started and just barely running. It was not the first time the kids had been called on to shove her into action, and they were pretty expert by now. Cheering at their own efforts, she sputtered into life. They dived into the car. We set off up the road, backfiring every few seconds. We must have looked like something out of a James Bond movie as we drove off, with billowing smoke out of the exhaust and lingering behind the car in a thick gray cloud. But instead of racing away smoothly, we were engulfed in smoke and chugging to a standstill. The reflection in the rear vision mirror told me there was no way we would ever make it to the road outside our house, let alone onto the highway. I usually managed to coerce the Chevy into cooperating, but today it was not having any of it. A couple of minutes later, we were all standing around, miserably in a circle at the side of the road, with me cursing Bob, from who I had bought the Rolls, the car, life in general, and the kids were pulling faces showing various degrees of disappointment. "It's no bloody good," I said. "We'll have to give it a miss. She's not going anywhere." Boy gave the front tire a kick in frustration. We had all been looking forward to going to the Midtown meet, and now we were going to have to miss it. The farm was pretty isolated. The only bus service was a school bus, which was no use on a Sunday. And there was no way all the kids could fit on the back of the bike. Usually Hemi, my partner, or one of his club mates, Pup, Dazzle, or Angry, would have been there to sort things out and try to get the car running. But they had all stayed with Hemi at the Abigail Riders clubhouse the previous night. It had been a Saturday night and they had been drinking pretty heavily and didn't want to ride back to our place. Hemi had rung me that morning from the clubhouse to let me know that he was going to the swap meet and to see what plans I had made. He had asked if he should come back home first, but I had told him not to bother. We would meet him there. After all, Midtown was south of Parkland where the clubhouse was located, and Loganville, where we lived, was northwest, so it made more sense to travel separately. Now I was annoyed with myself. By now, Irina was wailing in disappointment, and I thought for a minute that I might give Hemi a call and get him to change his plans. I thought better of it. More than likely, he would have left for the meet already, and realistically, the chances of Hemi being able to fix the Chevy were about as good as Irina's wailing getting star billing at the Grand Ole Opry. I grew up with a passion for motorcycles. I bought my first bike, a 1951 BSA side valve, for a couple of bucks when I was 14. It was a basket case. It was in pieces and had to be rebuilt. So, getting my hands dirty didn't bother me if it meant getting something to run. I could tinker with bikes and cars when the repairs were simple, but the Chevy's problems were far more complicated than any I had dealt with before. I had become well acquainted with her engine in the 18 months since I had bought the damn thing, and I knew that this time the trouble was terminal. I looked around at the kids, and a little voice from the back of the group said tearfully, "Does this mean we're not going to see Daddy today? We can't give him our presents." It was Charlie, my youngest. Next to him, Irina was doing her "Aw, Mom" routine, tears starting to run down her cheeks, while the rest of them stared mournfully at me. I shrugged. "Sorry, kids. Looks like she's had it." "Let's turn her around." Together we pushed and shoved the car back up the road to the farm. When I look back now, I sometimes wonder how differently that day might have turned out for me and the kids if Honest Bob had sold me a decent car instead of a white Chevy. It sends a shudder down my spine to think that we may owe our lives to the bucket of rust. Normally, it would not have been such a big deal to have a car break down. The kids had learned to get used to it over the past few weeks. But today, being Hemi's birthday, the breakdown meant a great deal. They had all been out to buy Hemi's presents and had spent the previous night wrapping them carefully, excited that they could give them to Hemi today at the meet. The gifts were their own idea and mission, and they had not let me help choose them. Irina and Charlie had gone off together with their pocket money on Saturday to one of the bike shops and had each come back with a small tool appropriate for Hemi's Harley. The parcels were not the tidiest I'd ever seen, but they had undertaken the whole thing themselves. I told them I thought they were pretty good. In fact, I was proud. Boy, the eldest, had a good relationship with Hemi. He had spent a whole afternoon shopping for something special. He had finally come home with a huge t-shirt. He had boasted to the shop assistant that his dad was 6'8" tall, and she had sold him what she said was the biggest t-shirt in the shop. It had Harley printed across the front of it. And Boy kept asking me, "Do you think he will like it? Do you think it will fit?" Every 5 minutes on that Saturday night before his birthday. I couldn't even wait to see Hemi's face when he opened it. I knew it would make him really happy. Being a typical man, I didn't think he'd even realize it was his birthday. For a long time, it had been just me and the kids on our own. I met Hemi through Dazzle, named for the colored beads in his long dreadlocks. Dazzle had been living in my bunkhouse for a couple of years, a good friend, biker, and tenant. He decided to start up a bike building business in the back shed with his fellow biker, Hemi. Hemi started spending so much time on the farm that he too eventually moved into the room in the bunkhouse next to Dazzle. The kids took to Hemi immediately. I think because he was like a huge kid himself. He made time for them, telling them stories, fixing their push bikes, making kites and playing games. They fell in love with him, and he with them. Hemi and I eventually got together as a couple, and a year later, he asked me to marry him. We had set the date for our wedding for the spring coming up. It was only a few weeks away now, and the kids were ecstatic. The presents for his birthday had a special meaning, a way of showing their happiness that he was officially part of the family. But it could not be helped. The present giving would have to be delayed until Hemi returned from the swap meet. I herded the kids back to the house, telling them that he could get his presents when we had our barbecue later that evening. It didn't do much to lighten the gloom. Irina was sticking out her bottom lip and behaving as though it was the end of the world. But when I said we could have our own party right now, and the other one when Daddy got home, the tears disappeared. The older kids started making sprinkle bread. All of them were excited. I went into my bedroom and telephoned my friend Mare, with whom I had planned to spend some time at the swap meet. Mare lived in the city near the university where she was doing a doctorate in music, but she was also a keen bike enthusiast. She was riding to the meet on her Triumph. The two things she and I had in common were music and motorcycles. We had met at a music festival years before, and we had just clicked. She was the sort of woman who did her own thing, was independent and resilient, and I admired that. Most of the women I met on the bike scene were either very timid or else brash and reactive. Mare was different. She was not typical of the type of woman that hung off the back of a Harley. We often had good and deep conversations and could have a good laugh. I loved her company and thought of her as a sister.